is the market going to be a little higher? Whether it's the Twitter echo chamber or just someone in your league is going to be more likely to want this player over the next month. So that's how I looked at it. So however you want to think about it, if you literally want to think technically, you think this player is going to have a higher ADP in 1 month, I think that's fine too. I think both answers satisfy what he was asking for. So I'll share my screen. And again, we omitted quarterbacks, and it's all players that are over 28. Everyone else that's listed on the current February DLF ADP that do not fit outside of that category are eligible. Welcome back, Manic and Chill, for the second week straight. That has not happened Has it ever happened before?
No, we were the first 2 weeks we did this show. We were good, man. We did week 1, week 2, and then it was like week. Yeah.
Well, we're back.
2
weeks straight.
We did it.
We had a interesting topic that we have in line for tonight. So welcome back, Manic and Chill, for another week. And we are February 25th is when we're recording this. This will probably come out like a day later. Who knows? But we're recording this on February 25th. I believe we are exactly 3 weeks away from the start of free agency. I think it would have been afternoon yesterday would have been the 3-week period. So I think we're right in line with free agency starting here in the next 3 weeks. So a lot can happen. But some people would consider this to be like a dead period in Dynasty a little bit, where there's not a lot of movement, because I've gotten a lot of responses, at least, hey, I'm just going to wait. I want to see what happens, that type of response. And it annoys me to no end. So Shane, I want to get your thoughts. But first, before we do that, how you doing? What's happened in the last week since we did the last episode?
Oh, geez, so much. I got a haircut, so there's that. That was big.
I need one.
Really big. Yeah. We're working on that. I don't know if you knew about this, but we're working on a Dynasty draft guide at DLF. Do you know about that?
Yeah, apparently it's longer than we thought, huh?
It's a little, yeah. I'm going to say a lot of that's because of you. It's a little more in depth than should I say in depth? It's more girthy than we originally anticipated. So it's going to be a monster. It's going to be well worth the cost. Some really smart people like you worked on it. Addison Hayes, Ryan McDowell, Jeff, John. I should know their last names, and I don't.
Jeff Smith, Hesterman. John Hesterman. Yep. Proper shout outs. Maybe we'll get some guests on Manic and Chill at some point to talk about some of that content. But yeah, we're
going to get them. So that's over the last week. That's my excitement that that guide is getting closer to hit and an official announcement pretty soon, I hope. Yep. So if anyone's watching this, don't tell DLF that I said anything about it yet, because they haven't officially announced it.
Yeah, we have some editing time. Maybe the time it takes to get this out and editing done, then there will already be the announcement, so we're covered. But yeah, be on the lookout for a big draft guide that you can download and you can read on your computer, or maybe you can even read on a mobile device that makes it really easy. But yeah, there's a lot of content, a lot of words. I'm glad to know that a lot of the words I submitted didn't get cut down. So there's going to be a lot of me just going on and on and on, just like I do on Manic and Chill. So anyway, let's get to the topic tonight. You want to introduce it, Shane? It was from actually one of our patrons in both of our patron chats. We threw it out there because we're not the most creative. We're just like, hey, let's get on and talk Dynasty. And someone actually said maybe you should structure the show and do something where you have an objective instead of just talk for 40 minutes. So I'll let you introduce it. I thought it was a cool topic. I'll share my screen in a second so everyone can see where both of our brains are scrambling for answers. But I'll let you introduce the topic for tonight.
Yes, and I appreciate that someone gave us some structure that we sorely need in our life.
Remember when we used to have a show sheet, like the first episode?
I did. I put a little logo on it. I did 2 show sheets, matter of fact, episode 1 and episode 2, and then not so much. But I like to think that's because you're smart enough that you don't need a show sheet, and I can just sit here and pretend. Yeah, I look pretty. That's my job. You do. So anyway, great topic. Corey, patron of both of ours, said, hey, why don't you pick 10 players over the age of 28 years old whose ADP will increase? Now, he left it open-ended. So like he meant like ever, which is pretty broad. And then you, being the curmudgeon that you are, said, no, that's too easy. Whose ADP can rise just over the next month. Mainly because you have free agencies coming, and that's going to impact a lot of things that happen. And then to kick up the difficulty of it, we took out quarterbacks. So it can only be a running back, wide receiver, tight end over the age of 28 today, whose value can increase over the next month.
And we said value increased from an ADP standpoint, but let's kind of even omit ADP, because the mythical ADP on DLF, I mean, who knows how people are going to input their picks to create the ADP. So I'm almost thinking of like, what do we think? I'm thinking of it this way. Is the market going to be a little higher? Whether it's the Twitter echo chamber or just someone in your league is going to be more likely to want this player over the next month. So that's how I looked at it. So however you want to think about it, if you literally want to think technically, you think this player is going to have a higher ADP in 1 month, I think that's fine too. I think both answers satisfy what he was asking for. So I'll share my screen. And again, we omitted quarterbacks, and it's all players that are over 28. Everyone else that's listed on the current February DLF ADP that do not fit outside of that category are eligible. So I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to see some good players and some players at the bottom that, I don't know if anybody really cares about, but we'll see either way. So I'm going to share it. So I sorted it by overall ADP. So this is going from the top. Any names stick out? I'll let you pick the first one, Shane. And then we'll kind of just talk for a couple minutes about the player as to why, and then we'll go from there. So any names stick out to you on this list?
And he's been sticking out to me just listening to people talk about startup drafts. Julio Jones. I know he's 32 now, right? It actually says it there, doesn't it? Yeah, he's 32. He's 32.
You see that column that says age. That's a good place to look.
That's a big help. That's a big help right there. Also, it tells me what team he plays for. So I know he's 32, but he's still Julio Jones. And I feel like because he ended last year injured, a lot of people are forgetting what Julio Jones is. And Julio Jones is a wide receiver one just about every week. He's one of the more consistent, even though, that's not a thing, but he's one of the more consistent wide receivers out there when he's on the field. And I think in the next month, we'll start hearing the good news about how healthy he feels again. And we'll start getting some idea of what type of offense the Falcons are going to run. And if they're smart, I'm assuming it's going to be passing the ball a lot because you have Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. And I don't see Atlanta. They're not in the cap situation where they can sign any wide receivers. And honestly, there's no wide receivers on the market that should take snaps away from either Julio Jones or Calvin Ridley. So I think as the startup market starts to realize like, oh, Julio's falling, like people are letting him fall to wide receiver 27, which is ridiculous. That's going to correct itself.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think we can learn a lot from the process here of obviously a guy like Julio Jones, his ADP or value is going to fall as we get to the offseason, and it's going to slowly rise. And I think that there's something to be said about, and we'll see where the cap ends up. I think there's a lot more to the cap than people talk about typically when they're talking about the cap echo chamber and, teams are going to need to cut all these players and the assumption that this team's not going to be able to bring anybody in because they're so far against the cap. I recommend everyone listen to Andrew Brandt's podcast this week, where he goes through some of the nuances of the cap and talks about, how there's teams can find cap room that we don't maybe factor in, borrowing it from future years, but also rolling it over from past years. So really every team has their own, cap that they're going to stick to based on money that they've been able to roll over from anyway. So we're getting away from the point though. I think with Julio last year, I believe he was wide receiver 16 in points per game. No, 14 in points per game. But he only played 9 games. So obviously the totals, he's not going to finish up there, in the top 24. But points per game wise, he was still a high end wide receiver too. And even though he's 32, I think we've talked about it before with how many receivers there are that are kind of in that range of wide receiver 2 through 5. He's a guy you can probably pivot off of for somebody there that, could give you low end wide receiver 1 numbers. And even if he only plays, 10, 12 games, it doesn't matter. If you get wide receiver 10 numbers when he's playing, that's what you care about. You care about winning weeks, not necessarily winning the overall season. So I think it's a good point. And I do think that as much as I've kind of crapped on Matt Ryan for, how he's played the last couple of years, I do think, or at least hope, that we see maybe some better efficiency for him now that maybe he gets a running game this year. Maybe he has a little bit better of a scheme there where he's not going to have to drop back as much. I mean, he doesn't smell like the quarterback that should be throwing the ball the most in the league. And over the last couple of years, I mean, he's right up there in the top 3 in pass attempts. That's probably not ideal. If you look at just some efficiency numbers, it's like one of the least efficient plays you can make is a Matt Ryan pass attempt. So why are we dropping back so many times? We have to have a little more balance. So I don't know. I agree with you on Julio. I think it's just going to naturally. Don't you think this basically applies to a lot of guys that are over that age cliff already, to where, it's like the whole Larry Fitzgerald or Julian Edelman effect, where once they hit like 31, their value never goes down, but it really never goes up, because it's just like there's half the teams in the league really are never going to want them. So the person that has them is probably always just swapping them back and forth with somebody else that may be interested in that type of player, but never really goes up. So I think it's just going to naturally rise a little bit just because people are getting closer to the season and they evaluate their needs. Don't you think that applies to a lot of other guys too? Yeah,
and part of it's that, well, he can't mythically be on my team for the next 15 years, which is why we love rookies and 22-year-olds, because they're going to be on my roster for the next 15 years, even though, again, no, they're not. No one's going to be on your roster more than 3 years because you're a degenerate like us and you play in too many dynasty leagues and you trade too much. And I don't mean that as a negative at all, because I do all those things. There's more than a few guys I think are going to fall into that category. So any names? There's another one sticking out to me, but I want to see if you'll where you're going to go with this.
Well, I was just going to piggyback. There's another one on there. I mean, Adam Thielen kind of fits the same mold as Julio. If you're looking at what his market value is, he's got a little more market value, but I mean, he's on this list that sticks out as a guy that I think his ADP is going to go up. And then the other one that I'm looking at right here without scrolling down, because there's some really, really cool names when we scroll down. But the one that stood out to me on here was Odell. And I don't know what you think about Odell. I was basically off of Odell last year because of, the fact that he was hurt. He really hasn't produced for 3 seasons. And then he goes down with an ACL injury. And you don't really know, what's his future going to be. We still don't know what his future is going to be. But again, like the upside of where you're getting him, wide receiver 40 right now, I think the value is just going to slowly creep up. We're going to get inevitably, wouldn't you say something in the next maybe month, 2 months or so about he's on track. He's coming back. You're going to get some sort of workout video or something to where, because especially if he's going to get traded or potentially going to get moved in some capacity, there has to be some assurance that he's healthy, right? It's not just going to be, well, no one's seen anything from him in 4 months. So what's going on with him? So I think there's going to be something on him that's going to pop out to where his value is just going to slowly rise. People are going to get sucked in again on what he was in 2015 and 2016. And the value is just going to go up a little bit. And it's interesting because you're going to be challenging Odell and Julio and Adam Thielen. These guys are going to be challenging some of the rookies that are going to inevitably move up too. So maybe we'll get into some rookies. But I think Odell fits the same mold. The only downside with a guy like that is I've found in some leagues where I have him, there's people that just are off of him entirely. Like don't want him, don't want to touch him. They've been off. Now he has an ACL injury he's coming back from. So I can see people saying, I just don't want him. But I do think his ADP is going to go up in the next month or two, especially if there's a rumor that he goes to a different team. Just a movement of a team could potentially spike his ADP for no reason other than people are just get excited about him again.
I like that one. And I'm just looking at the DLF ADP now, just to look at some of the wide receivers that are going before him. And Adam Thielen's one of them, although people can see that on your chart there. Laviska Shenault, Tyler Boyd, Jalen Waddle, I guess. Okay, maybe. Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton at his best, is he what Odell can be at 80% of Odell if you get Odell back? At 80% of what he was. Now, and I know it's been, 3 years since we've seen that, and he might not have that in him anymore. I mean, he might legit be toast. But, my brain tells me that there can't be 39 other wide receivers that I would take over him.
Well, and it's interesting because I think that, and I just did a podcast, the Patreon show that I did last night. I'm actually really intrigued if Odell does stay in Cleveland, and I think people are fading him necessarily if he stays in Cleveland because, you know, the quote unquote volume is not going to be there. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think he's going to be a guy that goes anywhere and just commands. You know, he's not going anywhere to get 150 plus targets. I don't think you're going to necessarily. There's very few guys that are of that age that haven't done it for so long that are just immediately going to jump back into that range right away. So I almost think I kind of want him to stay with Cleveland. I'm okay with him getting 130 targets in Cleveland or 125 or whatever, you know, whatever the average total for a guy that's a number one receiver that plays 90+% of the snaps is going to get. I mean, I'm okay with that. I think he can still get there. You know, he can still be a low-end wide receiver 2 at the worst if he's healthy in that offense. But I just don't think you can project him to get the same volume that he used to get because he never used to be like the absolute volume hog. But, you know, the reason when he blew up was because he was so efficient and he's getting, you know, 150 plus targets. He's not going to get that anymore.
Yeah, if he could get him back to even the 133 targets he saw his first year in Cleveland, but more efficient, that's fine. That's more.
I'll take 130 from Mayfield, who's above average in efficiency. I'm fine with that. I think both he and Landry can get there. Then it's going to determine where do the other targets go to. I mean, they're probably not going to throw the ball more than 500 times. So, you know, 130 for both those receivers, if they keep both of them, that adds up pretty quick. So, you know, can some of the other guys get there? I don't know. But I think if Odell's healthy, he's going to come right back and command, you know, probably the top or second highest target share on the team. So he's another one. Any other names on that list before I scroll down a little bit to get to the real sexy names?
It feels like cheating saying Logan Thomas, right? But Logan Thomas.
No, I want to hear your take because that's a guy I own a lot of shares of, and I'm not sure. I want to hear your take.
You know, first of all, he's a tight end, so we know they can play until their late 70s, productively, allegedly. You know, because Jason Witten was still a tight end 1 until he was 46. Never mind that he was scoring 9 points a week, but, you know, whatever. He was a tight end 1.
He existed.
Yep. Logan Thomas just switched positions, right? The last couple of years. Last year was really the first chance he's ever had to be a starting tight end in the league. And he was excellent. And he did that with Alex Smith and Tyler. I don't remember his last name because it's not that important. And Dwayne Haskins.
Taylor Heineke?
Heineke. I keep calling him Weineke. I'm not sure why. I'm not going to learn his name because I'm hopefully never going to see him on a football field again. But just any quarterback they get, I have to believe is an upgrade over what Logan Thomas has had. And yes, they can fill up at other positions because they have absolutely no one on that offense except for him, McLaurin, and Gibson. Like they could add 2 more wide receivers easily. But I think, you know, just knowing that he's only played that position for a few years, and his quarterback situation, it almost has to get better, right? It can't get worse, right? Unless they sign Alex Smith. I don't know. I don't know who they could sign that would make it worse. Even if they signed Mitch Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky was actually decent for Jimmy Graham last year and for Cole Kmet when they were letting him run. So I think Logan Thomas is a guy that can jump up and I don't see Washington making any moves as far as a tight end in the tight end market, except for Hunter Henry isn't really that strong anyway. So I'll go with Logan.
I don't mind it. You know, if you look at the efficiency numbers, I mean, Alex Smith was literally the worst quarterback in the league. I mean, right there as one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I mean, he averaged 6.3 yards per attempt, which is on the very low end. But you look at their offense, you know, one thing that I'm really intrigued with Washington is, you know, when Ron Rivera was in Carolina, they ran a fast-paced offense. And yes, they had Christian McCaffrey. They had Cam Newton. So they had maybe a little more of a base to do that than they did last year. But you still look at last year, I mean, between Alex Smith and Dwayne Haskins and then Kyle Allen and Taylor Heineke, I mean, they still threw the ball almost 600 times. So it's not like they are a slow-paced plodding offense. So even if they bring in a quarterback that, like you've heard some links of guys that could go there. Like Marcus Mariota could be a guy that maybe goes there. Maybe Sam Darnold could be a guy that goes there. I mean, there's so many names we could talk about, but I'm almost thinking, I don't really care. I want for somebody to go to Washington. I want it to be a quarterback that can pick up the pace a little bit, because I think it'll fit nicely with that offense. I want an efficient quarterback. So we'll see who that is. I mean, if it's Mariota, I'd be happy. If it's a guy like Darnold, I'd be skeptical. But if they do end up adding somebody, I mean, there's so many names out there that they could potentially add. I'd be interested. I would be interested if Mac Jones goes there. And we talked a little about Mac Jones last week. Like, that would be a landing spot where I could get behind. I've seen him mocked to Washington a couple times. I think sounds like he may end up going higher than that. I think they pick at 19, and I think I could see him going in the top 15 or higher at this point. But I think that is actually a decent landing spot if they can find an efficient quarterback for Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson to get more work in the passing game, and another receiver. I mean, I've seen people mocking them a receiver in the draft, and the idea, well, it's going to kill Terry McLaurin, it's going to kill Logan Thomas. I don't think so. I think they're going to have enough volume and enough pace to go around that I don't think it's going to kill any of those guys. So I can get on board with the Logan Thomas part. Here's my question for you: is do you think last year was just simply a product of the system? A product of nobody else to throw to? I mean, do you think he would be the one that is just squeezed out if they bring in, say they draft a receiver in the second round and it's a guy we really like? I mean, do you think he's just a guy that's squeezed out because he didn't do anything till he's 30 years old?
No. Now, so Peter Howard has brought me around to the dark side. Another fabulous DLF writer. But targets are earned. Cam Sims didn't see, the target share that Logan Thomas did. Steven Sims, I think they're both named Sims, but you know what I mean? There were other players on that Washington roster that if they were half decent, then they would have gotten targets. And obviously I know it's different positions, but they also had Jeremy Sprinkle there, who apparently is very bad, but still targets are earned.
Great analysis there.
Yeah. But I mean, targets are earned, and I feel like he's earned his targets. And like you said, they throw the ball a lot, and we saw tight ends succeed in Ron Rivera offenses before. That guy, what was his name? Greg Olsen was really good for a really long time. And I'm not saying Logan Thomas is, at Greg Olsen's skill level, because Olsen's borderline Hall of Famer. But he's good. He's very good. You saw that last year, just the eye test. It wasn't like he was doing nothing with his targets. He was converting on them, and he was efficient with them. And I think he's a good tight end. And if a defense has to pay attention to more than two people on a play on that offense, that can only help him, since he's one of the two people that they actually had to account for.
Yep. Yeah, and I think there's it's very low hanging fruit at the tight end position, to where, what are your expectations for Logan Thomas? At his current value, what are your expectations for him? So I can get behind that. I'm going to throw out another tight end, and this is a guy that I couldn't have been further off of this player last year. And I joke because I literally had him on one team in October. And now it is February 25th. And of course, I'm a degenerate, so I've added probably 4 or 5 leagues since the end of the season. But I've done a couple dispersal drafts. One of these was a draft that I actually threw my team in the dispersal. I didn't have him, but I picked him up in that dispersal because I threw my team in. But I went from owning this player on one team. I now have him on 10 rosters in a span of, 4 months? October to February? So, any idea who it is? I posted it in the chat like a million times, but he is tight end. I won't tell you, but any idea who you might think this player is, Shane? I was off him last year, and now he's almost one of my highest rostered tight ends.
No, this can't be like the one of the guys that was a convert. No, he's too young. No.
Nope.
The guy I'm thinking of is too young. So, no. Let me know.
Nope. This player just turned 28, so he fits our criteria. It's Tyler Higbee, tight end 21. Tight end 21.
21?
Now, 21.
Scroll down. Are you sure about that?
I am. Let me scroll down so you can see. There you go, right there.
Wow.
Tight end 21.
How sure
Zach Ertz is ahead of him.
as a community, our attention span is really short. But
Yes.
yeah, sell me on some Higbee if I wasn't sold.
Well, so here's the thing. I'll be completely transparent about this. A lot of the teams I own him on are heavy tight end premium. So they are 175 or 2 PPR. And I'm looking at him and saying, in those leagues, check out maybe there's a draft guide coming out that has some stuff with this. But, I think that one thing about Higbee or anybody else in one of these, if there's a team or a group of teams that are going to be up against the cap in terms of very little wiggle room, I think the Rams might be one of those teams. I think they have 7 players on their roster that make up they only have like $37 million left in cap room for the rest of their roster behind their top 7 players. And so I'm almost looking at the Rams and saying, if you're on their roster, anybody that's going to be drafted by them, I'm interested in, because it's almost like they're going to make the team. They're probably going to have a role. As much as I don't like guys like Van Jefferson, and we saw nothing last year at all from like Bryson Hopkins, like they're going to make the team. Unless they just absolutely suck, they are going to make the team, and they're probably going to have roles, because the Rams are going to be relying on 70% of their players are going to be guys that are literally on rookie contracts. So on the other end, I look at someone like Higbee and say, is there a way he is not involved in their offense? Even if he's the number 4 option, even if they end up bringing in like Darrell Henderson and they give him a bunch of targets as a third down back, like is Higbee going to be at best, at worst, the 4th option? So, I mean, I'm looking at tight end 21 and saying, tell me if you think this is realistic for him. 75 targets, 55 catches, 600 yards, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not crazy.
Mm.
And, you do the math, 55, 60, 5 touchdowns. I mean, you're looking at 145 points. That's basically what Evan Ingram did last year. And he was super inefficient. Now, if efficiency goes up, which I think it will with Stafford, that's one of the selling points on Stafford, is pretty efficient. And so, with someone like Stafford, I think it's going to improve the quality of the targets that Tyler Higbee's going to get. So that's my sales job on Tyler Higbee. Oh, Shane dropped out. Anyway, Tyler Higbee, he's been the most added tight end for me over the last 4 months. I've literally added him on 9 rosters. Shane, you're back?
Yeah, apparently my camera isn't, though, so...
Oh, no, I can't see you.
All the viewers have checked in just to look at me and say that I'm pretty, but that's okay.
Anyway, I was selling him on Tyler Higbee, man. Even if he gets 75 targets, I think he can crack top 12 tight end, which we know really doesn't mean a whole lot, but that's why I said I'm more interested in getting him on teams that are in these leagues where it's 175 or 2 PPR, like the DLF Champ Series. I mean, if he goes 50, 505 in those leagues, that's 180 points in a 2 PPR league. So that's a flex every single week. So I'm on board. I don't know if you are, but tight end 21, I think his ADP will rise.
Again, there's not 21. I'm simple. I'm a simple man. So I do easy numbers, and I go, are there 20 other tight ends that I want before Tyler Higbee? And I don't even like Tyler Higbee that much, but the answer is no, there's not. He's entering the tight end prime, right? 28. We've seen him produce as a tight end 1 when Gerald Everett wasn't there, right? When Gerald Everett was hurt. And guess what? Now we're going to get to see him when Gerald Everett's not on the team anymore.
Yep.
And he's got a much better quarterback now. He's got a infinitely better quarterback. Even if you don't dislike Jared Goff as much as I do, you have to agree that Matthew Stafford is a giant upgrade. So yeah, I love that Tyler Higbee, and I'm a little jealous. I feel like you cheated because it's your sheet, so you kind of knew what was coming, and I didn't.
Not really. But you know what though? I have now scrolled outside of the top 150, so that's I'm gonna put your feet to the fire now, since your video went out on everybody, and all they can see is I don't even know what it's the just default StreamYard logo that Shane is right now.
I don't even get my own avatar. It's some weird I'm not sure what it is.
It's just broken at this point. So your punishment is you're going to have to go through and pick This this is a pretty ugly list. You see anybody on this list that you think their value could go up?
Well, is that Marvin Jones?
I should have gone outside the top 155. Yes, Marvin Jones is on there, wide receiver 69.
Okay, so Marvin Jones is going to sign somewhere, right?
Anywhere.
Anywhere he goes is an upgrade. And then as soon as he signs somewhere, Twitter's going to go crazy and go, who's a great sleeper for next year? Marvin Jones. Because you know why? Because he's a great sleeper every year. If the guy's on the field, he's boom bust. Let's put that out there. He's very boom bust, like week to week. Now, year to year, he's consistent. He's going to be a wide receiver too, usually. But he's a guy that can win weeks for you. Coming out of what I would hope is your wide receiver 4 or flex position. So I'm taking Marvin Jones because, right now I'm buying into that beautiful story that he's going to end up in Green Bay and catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. Oh, because that's just going to be beautiful. But anywhere he goes is going to be better than what he dealt with last year when Stafford was injured.
And lesson learned, I just looked. So last February, you see he's wide receiver 69 right now, right? So last February, where do you think Marvin Jones' ADP was? Wide receiver wise. What wide receiver rank was he?
Let's see.
No cheating. Just guess.
Well, I'm guessing he's 69 now, so I'm going to guess he was 60.
Very close. He was wide receiver 64 last February. So this time of year, his value had already plummeted outside the top 50. Right before the season, so the September ADP, which would have been run right before the season started, he was wide receiver 52. So he gained almost 2 rounds of ADP value just from February to September. Now, last year, he didn't change teams, right? He didn't change quarterbacks, didn't change systems, he didn't change offenses, nothing. So, you saw the same thing last year. I think you're right. This year, wherever he signs, even though he's a year older, once you hit to that 29, 30, 31, it doesn't matter. Your value's shot already. It's always going to go down when people don't want veterans. So it's going to go up. I think you're right. It's probably going to go. I actually think it could exceed that wide receiver 52 from last year if he hits in a really good spot. If he went to Green Bay, yeah, it would go and it would definitely crack the top 50 in the next 3 months. So that's an interesting one. That's a good pick. You kind of cheated because you picked the top guy. Everyone else is gross. So now I'm stuck looking at these guys.
It's not great.
No, man. No, it's bad.
I keep scrolling. There's got to be something under that, right?
No, I'm going to pick from this list just to discipline myself. I'm going to go. There's 2 guys on this list that I think have a path. I think one of them is Damian Williams, running back 58. Now, that could be one where we don't know if the guy's going to come back. All signs point towards him coming back next year because he's still going to be under contract, the same contract he would have been under in 2020. He's going to extend into 2021. Now, we'll see what happens with the Chiefs backfield. We'll see what it looks like. Shane leaves. He doesn't like my Damian Williams take. But we're going to see Damian Williams either completely fall out because he doesn't land in the depth chart with the Chiefs. Like, he's not part of their plans. Let's say they say they're going to end up cutting him and he's not going to be part of their plans next year. He's going to fall completely out. If he's not on the Chiefs, his value is going to plummet. But I think if he's in line to be in that backfield next year, and we're probably going to get some clarity on that, once we get through free agency, I can see Damian Williams' ADP rise a little bit because right now, if you just go to DLF's ADP and you look at running backs and sort them from like running back 25 to 70, it is just a bunch of junk. And there's players that have produced in the past. There's players that are up there simply because they have a good profile, but they've never done anything. It's just a mishmash of guys. And in startup drafts, one of the things that I've been preaching is just take as many of these guys in that range as you can, but don't bank on any of them. Don't bank that what their situation is going to be. So I think he fits in that category of a guy you just take in a startup and you just hope things break your way, but you probably need to take 8 to 10 of those guys if you're doing a brand new startup and just hope that you hit on a couple guys that are going to be relevant week 1. I think he was one, Shane. I think James White is another one. If he ends up signing with Tampa Bay, like the narrative's already out there, they could use a pass catching back. I know people that like Keyshawn Vaughn still don't want to hear that. But would you be shocked if James White landed in Tampa Bay with one more run take a run with Brady for one more year? I wouldn't.
No. And I was a little disappointed actually that the Patriots didn't do the right thing and just cut him last year so that he could go with Tom Brady to Tampa Bay. As much as I love Ronald Jones, that just makes sense. They go together, you know.
Well, and he's also a guy that I think fell. I think people are going to look back at James White last year and say he fell off. I've already heard it on a couple podcasts where one of the hosts has brought that up, like, hey, James White could end up in Tampa Bay. And I've heard some people say, you know, he's cooked, he's done. I mean, if everyone remembers, he was a victim of a major tragedy with his parents getting in that accident last year. And, you know, who knows how that impacted his season. And then the fact that they had, you know, not a Tom Brady offense. I mean, I'm almost willing to give him one more shot with how good he's been in the passing game in the past. I think his ADP can go up. If he signs anywhere where you think he may have at least, you know, 40% snap share, third down role, I think his ADP will go up. So I think just like Damian Williams, James White could retire and he's gone. Damian Williams could get cut and he's not on the Chiefs. He's done. But I think both of them have a decent chance of going up just because they're basically just being forgotten at this point.
Yeah, and I've never liked Damian Williams. Well, that's mean. I've always felt like he was more a product of a system, but I'll say
he stole Shane's lunch money back in high school.
Watching Clyde Edwards-Helaire struggle like he did last year when Damian Williams made it look so very easy made me appreciate Damian Williams a little more. If I can see where we get a lot of narrative.
And I think that narrative will be real on Damian Williams' value too.
Right. And he's on the Chiefs, so there's no reason to think that they're not going to use him. Like Andy Reid doesn't have a fantasy team as far as I know. So, it got real ugly, huh?
Yes, I scrolled down and it got even uglier. This is tough. I can scroll back up just to give you a couple more shots. What do you want me to do?
I want to point something out. So, Le'Veon Bell, right? He's a guy that at some point someone's going to tell you he can't be that bad, right? Like you should buy him. No, you should not. He is definitely that bad. John Brown. So next week when we pick the guys whose ADPs are going to go down, you would still say Le'Veon Bell's ADP goes down just because he's done. It's amazing, but he's almost in the undrafted range. Yeah, so I'll go with he'll be undrafted in about 4 more weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
How's Gio Bernard down there? Didn't we do this last year? Didn't he do what we wanted him to do? Joe Mixon went out. Yeah. Gio went in. I faded Gio. I thought he was washed, but he went out there and he put up really good numbers when he was the starter last year. And we immediately forgot. It's like you talk about this all the time, though, in the offseason, where even though these guys, we've seen them give us production before, they hold no value whatsoever to anyone. Right. Nobody wants to trade for Gio Bernard. Nobody wants to be that guy. You might be smart just sending a 4th for Gio Bernard, though. Though his ADP might not rise. Carlos Hyde could go up, right? Could re-sign with Seattle, maybe? Yeah. Because, they're letting Chris Carson walk. I know we all love Rashad Penny. That was fun on Twitter last week when we all boosted his ADP back into the drafted range. But if they re-sign Carlos Hyde, there's no reason to think that they're not going to use him. They used him last year. They liked him. They've shown in the past that they want to run a split backfield. It's just that they've never been able to because they can't keep 2 running backs healthy at the same time. So I'll go with Carlos Hyde. That's it. I give up after that because it's just ugly. It's terrible.
Yeah, this is a tough exercise. I actually like the Carlos Hyde call because that's a guy that probably is just going to latch on somewhere and you know exactly what he's going to be. And at where he's going at right now, like as long as he's on a roster, he's worth more than what that ADP says. Like he's right now outside of that range where you're even taking shots in a startup. I mean, if you're in like a 2 tight end league where it's super flex, there's probably going to be a chance that he's going outside of like the top 25 rounds. So, I mean, he's literally just a player that potentially you could even see on waivers, depending on how many roster spots you have. So actually, I think I like the call of Carlos Hyde better than even the ones I talked about, because I think if you go out and try to trade for, like if you go try to trade like a 3rd rounder right now for James White, like there's a chance that you're not going to be able to even get that deal done because somebody has heard some narrative on James White before and said, it's possible that he's going to sign somewhere. So, I don't want to trade James White until I see if he signs with the Patriots. I think you can buy Carlos Hyde for basically the last pick in the 4th round right now if you wanted to get him. So, I definitely think that's actually a better call than the James White. There's 2 names on there, Shane. I'm sure you're probably going, what the heck are you thinking? There's 2 names on there that you actually like.
One of them's got to be Sanders, right? Emmanuel?
I think you could put Emmanuel Sanders and A.J. Green in the same category of literally look where they're at. Wide receiver 114 and wide receiver 117. These guys are, literally guys that have been former Pro Bowlers, and they're that far down. So that's basically people saying they are. You're talking about guys that'll be cut. So that just by default when they go somewhere else, because Emmanuel Sanders is going to get cut with the Saints cap situation. Right. He's almost an obvious cut. And A.J. Green's not going to be back for the Bengals. So those are 2 guys that are going to have new homes, and I think just. What do they have to do to go up? Wide receiver 102? They don't have to go very far. There's one more on there that I want to bring up, though. I think Jared Cook, don't be shocked if he ends up going somewhere that we go, man, I kind of like that landing spot. And I think you've probably written off Jared Cook in Dynasty, but, we see tight ends that last into their, mid-30s. So I'm not saying he's ever going to be like a top 12 tight end again. But what do you think about like Jared Cook signing a cheap deal in Tennessee, replacing Jonnu Smith with the super efficient Tannehill? I could see that being a spot where he goes and it's like, oh my gosh, like this guy could be a sleeper.
Yeah. Tight end 1. Tight end 1. Yeah, if he's, and again, not high tight end 1. I'm not crazy. I don't think he's going to supplant Kelsey, Waller, or Mark Andrews or anything, but I could definitely see him cracking the top 12 there because we've seen it. He's still. He might be old. I'm like a decade older than him, but he might be old for football. But the guy is still a physical marvel on the field. And he's still he's more athletic. And he's a good football player. Like he's a very good tight end that blossomed late. And yeah, he ends up in Tennessee or something like that. That'd be a great spot for him. Indianapolis, even.
Yeah. Those are some spots that could see. Obviously the Titans are going to need to probably replace Jonnu Smith, and I could see them trying to do it cheaply unless they draft a guy. And then, the Colts. The Colts are going to be in the tight end market. Whatever you think about Wentz, I know we hit Wentz pretty hard last week, but if we're just talking value gain, whatever tight end the Colts get, that value of that player is going to go up just based on how the market's going to react with Wentz. So yeah. Any final? We're out of players at this point.
We ran out of players, guys. And my camera gave up. My camera thought so little of these players that it just said it's not going to be a part of the show anymore. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, I should almost just switch to the just the view of me since we literally just get this StreamYard gray box up there with Shane. But anyway, it still says Shane is the worst. Hit us up. I like this episode because it was just one of our patrons came up with a topic. We threw names out there. We literally did it off the cuff by pulling the ADP like an hour before the show and just went through and gave our real thoughts. So hopefully people appreciate that. Shane, plug your stuff.
I do this. I do Dynasty Trades HQ. And I was part of the DLF Dynasty Draft Guide or whatever the hell we're going to call it. That is a massive Bible. So that's all I got, and that was awesome.
Yeah, and Shane's being very modest. He was more than a part of it. He was one of the jobs that I would never want. Was one of the frontline editors, which that's that is a God's work right there, Shane. So appreciate your time in doing that. As much as I don't love writing, I like writing. I don't love it. I don't know how you guys do it when you edit. That's another breed. So Shane is very, very modest when he said he's just a part of it. He was an integral part of the organization and being able to pull it off. So looking forward to that coming out. At Shane is the worst. You can see that. I'm at Charles Chill FFB, Dynasty and Chill. Have some really cool episodes coming up. We're going to have actually the 100th episode of the show is going to be coming up here in the next couple months. So that'll be something that we do something special for. And then we both have a Patreon. So if you want to interact with both of us, and half the people in each of our Patreons are the same. So it's a cool crowd. Shane and I are there, usually bantering back and forth. So if you like to bring Manic and Chill to a chat room, You'll get that at Dynasty Trades HQ and at Dynasty and Chill, both on Patreon. So until next week, shoot us some ideas if you want to have us do a off-topic show like this where we just pick a topic and roll with it. We'll do a couple more of those. Try to do it every single week. So with that, sign off. Any final word, Shane?
Hopefully you'll see me next week.
Yep. And yeah, we didn't give out any of Shane's personal information, but sign up for their Patreon. Shane obviously needs to get a new camera, so we need to get some more subs so he can pull from that Patreon money and get a new camera. So with that, hopefully the camera's back next week, Shane. See you later.
Peace.
Bye, DLF.